explosive weapon. Gomer, covered in mud and genuinely contrite, scrambled to his feet. He apologized profusely to the red-faced sergeant. He admitted honestly that he had absolutely no earthly idea how in the world he could have managed to do such a remarkably foolish thing. Punishment. But Boyle was not interested in a debate. He stepped forward, his demeanor entirely unyielding, and offered to show her a quick shortcut directly to the front gate of the base. He pointed a stiff arm down the dusty road, instructing her to walk straight ahead until she hit the main street, where she could easily catch a commercial bus back into town. He practically commanded her to leave, his tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation or argument. Defeated, heartbroken, and deeply offended by the incredibly rude treatment she had received from every superior officer she had encountered, Ambie offered a curt, quiet thank you and began the long, humiliating walk toward the main gate. Meanwhile, just outside the towering chain-link fences of Camp Henderson, a completely different scene was unfolding. Johnny Clark, a charismatic and well-known local television and radio personality, was broadcasting his popular afternoon show, Johnny Clark at Large, live from the street. He held a large, clunky microphone and smiled brightly for his audience. He wrapped up a heartwarming interview with a mother who had just visited her son Mickey, thanking her profusely for sharing her fascinating stories with their devoted listeners. As that guest stepped away, Johnny's sharp eyes caught sight of an older, highly respectable-looking woman storming out of the military gates. She looked visibly flustered, her posture rigid with righteous indignation. Sensing a potentially wonderful impromptu interview, Johnny quickly stepped into her path. He excused himself politely, addressing her as Madam, and asked if she would perhaps mind speaking with him and his audience for just a brief moment. Aunt Bee, still entirely consumed by her anger over Gomer's unjust treatment, stopped and looked at the man and his microphone. Johnny flashed his trademark winning smile and asked her how she had enjoyed her lovely visit to Camp Henderson that afternoon. Aunt Bee did not hesitate. The floodgates of her small town, moral outrage burst wide open. She leaned directly into the microphone and declared with absolute passion that she had not enjoyed her visit very much at all, and she could certainly tell the entire world that fact with absolute certainty. She stated, her voice quivering with genuine emotion, that she had absolutely never been so deeply shocked and completely surprised by appalling behavior in all her many years of life. She explained to the interviewer that she had merely come to the base to visit her dear boy, expecting a pleasant afternoon. Johnny Clark, recognizing the pure gold of live, unscripted human drama, tried to gently slow her down. He asked her to hold on just a moment, noting playfully that she obviously had a great deal of fascinating information to share, but requested that she first introduce herself to the audience by stating her name. Aunt Bee ignored the request entirely, too swept up in her narrative. She continued her tirade, declaring loudly that she had simply never heard anything like the horrific language and tone used inside that camp in her entire life. Johnny again tried to interject, asking for clarification. He wanted to know exactly who was doing all the terrible hollering and screaming she was referring to. Aunt Bee launched into a passionate description of the tyrannical Sergeant Carter. She painted a vivid picture of a man entirely unhinged, shouting and screaming at a sweet, innocent boy for absolutely no justifiable reason. She detailed the sheer absurdity of the punishment, explaining to the captivated radio audience how the poor boy was being forced to move a heavy sand pile from one random place to another random place, and then ordered to move it directly back again. She emphasized that the entire task made absolutely no logical sense whatsoever. And to make matters even worse, she continued, her voice rising in pitch, another military man had come along and practically physically pushed her right down the dusty road toward the exit gate. Johnny Clark's eyes widened in theatrical shock. He asked her to confirm her incredible statement. He wanted to know if a United States Marine had actually physically pushed her down the road. Aunt Bee, caught up in the emotional heat of the moment, confirmed with vigorous nods that yes, He most certainly had pushed her down the road. Johnny pressed for a name. Aunt Bee recalled the name she had heard and confidently stated that it was Sergeant Clark, accidentally confusing Boyle's name with the interviewer's name in her flustered state. But the accusation of a sergeant was clear enough. Johnny expressed deep, performative doubt, stating that he found such aggressive behavior from the esteemed military incredibly hard to believe. Aunt Bee stood her ground, insisting firmly that he absolutely did do it. She leaned closer to the microphone, summarizing her ultimate grievance. She explained that the physical pushing was awful, but it was the incessant, cruel hollering and screaming that had truly upset her delicate sensibilities. She delivered her final, devastating verdict with the righteous authority of a Mayberry matriarch. She stated clearly for everyone listening that back in her hometown, if a grown man ever behaved with such a shocking lack of manners and basic human decency, the good people of the town would absolutely not have a single thing to do with him. Johnny Clark was absolutely thrilled with the passionate, unexpected segment. He thanked Miss Taylor profusely, declaring that her unvarnished perspective was certainly incredibly interesting. He noted regretfully that they were rapidly running out of broadcast time for the afternoon, but he admitted that he personally would love to hear much more about this fascinating story. And he was absolutely certain his loyal listeners felt exactly the same way. He asked Aunt Bee if she was planning to remain in town through the following evening. Aunt Bee confirmed that she was indeed staying, as she fully intended to return to the camp to see her dear Gomer again. Johnny Clark smiled his brightest, most persuasive smile. He formally invited her to appear as a special featured guest on his highly rated evening television, programmed the very next night. Aunt Bee, feeling a deep sense of civic duty to expose the rudeness she had witnessed, happily accepted the invitation. Johnny wrapped up the afternoon broadcast, signing off with a flourish. News traveled incredibly fast within the tight-knit confines of Camp Henderson. Within an hour, the explosive radio broadcast had reached the ears of the upper brass. Inside the orderly room of Company B, Corporal Boyle stood rigidly at attention in front of the commanding officer's heavy wooden desk. He was aggressively defending his spotless military record into the telephone receiver, insisting desperately to a superior officer that he absolutely, positively did not push the civilian woman. He repeated his denial several times, his voice tinged with rising panic, before snapping off a crisp salute to the empty room and promising to report over to headquarters on the double. As Boyle slammed the telephone receiver down, Sergeant Carter walked in, completely unaware of the developing public relations disaster. Boyle turned to Carter, his face pale and eyes wide with shock. He repeated, almost to himself, that he truly did not push the lady. He looked at Carter and muttered darkly that some people in this world could really, truly fool a person. He recalled that the woman had seemed like such a remarkably sweet, gentle, motherly type of lady. Carter, confused but instantly wary, asked what was going on. Boyle looked him dead in the eye and delivered a chilling verdict. He warned Carter that the sweet old lady was actually a cold-blooded killer. And furthermore, Boyle stated with bitter resentment, this entire catastrophic mess was completely and utterly Sergeant Carter's fault. The repercussions of the colonel's subsequent dressing down of Sergeant Carter became wildly apparent the very next morning. The sun had barely begun to paint the horizon with pale shades of pink and gold when the barracks doors swung gently open. Instead of the usual ear-shattering roar of garbage can lid being smashed against a metal bedpost, a terrifyingly soft, melodic voice floated through the sleeping quarters. Sergeant Carter tiptoed down the central aisle, his voice artificially pitched an octave higher than usual, dripping with forced, sugary sweetness. He cheerfully bid his men a very good morning. He informed them gently that it was time to wake up. He used phrases that had never before crossed his lips, urging them to rise and shine, and softly coaxing them entirely out of their beds with sickeningly sweet encouragement. He paused beside Gomer's bunk. Gomer was sleeping soundly, a peaceful smile on his face. Carter leaned down, softly whispering his name several times. He informed Gomer gently